So my name is Loie Hayes. I work with Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Joining me today are Shannon, Bellamy, and Justin Bessette, who are representing Clean Heat Rhode Island. And as I said, my colleague Kate Marcelino is on the line. If you have any questions, technical in nature, Kate can possibly help you with that. And our topic today is heat pumps in Rhode Island. Very excited to bring you this special Rhode Island focused webinar today. So we'll cover some basic introductions about ourselves, and then heat pump basics, kind of a 101. Shannon's going to drill down in on the costs and incentives, and we'll talk a little bit about design considerations before taking your questions at the end. And we'll take those questions in written form in the question function. So Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a consumer organization. We're all about making it easier for consumers to make green energy choices, renewable energy choices. And right now, we're all facing a big transition of changing our heating away from fossil fuel combustion. And that's a society-wide transition that needs to happen, a lot of learning for all of us, and a lot of incentives to support that transition, both from the state and federal levels. So our program for heat pumps is specifically designed to help energy consumers understand the industry and the technology, and to help you find trusted vendors and sound advice. And you can find more details on our website. And Shannon and Justin, can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Bellamy. I am the program manager for Clean Heat Rhode Island. I work for Abode Energy Management. We're based out of Concord, Massachusetts. We manage a lot of heat pump programs and heat pump installer networks across the New England region. And then I'm joined today as well by my heat pump specialist, Justin, if you'd like to speak it on.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Justin Bessette. I'm Clean Heat Rhode Island's heat pump specialist. When you schedule a heat pump consultation, you'll have the pleasure of chatting with me. I have a background in building science. I've conducted over thousands of energy assessments, and so I have a very good understanding of how all the different things in your home will operate, and look forward to helping you today.
Thanks. And he'll also be helping address any questions that are in the chat throughout.
Oh, also, I am local to Rhode Island. I'm born and raised, and I live in Pawtucket.
Yeah. And today we want, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Clean Heat Rhode Island, which is the state of Rhode Island's newest heat pump incentive program, which is operated through the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources. This program just launched on September 1st and offers $25 million in federal funding for the adoption of energy efficient heat pumps. So our incentives are specifically focused for those who do not already currently heat with electricity, so those with oil, propane, gas, or other delivered fuels. And we offer specific incentives for residential, new construction, income eligible customers, and commercial customers. We also have a suite of services that I'll be talking a bit about a little bit later. But if you're interested in more information about the program, you can always go to cleanheatri.com to learn more.
Great, and I'll just mention Green Energy Consumers Alliance has been partnering with Abode Energy Management for the last year in Massachusetts, and we've just been so impressed with their services. We were very excited to hear that they were chosen to be the lead vendor on the Clean Heat Rhode Island program. So you are in very good hands with their technical expertise and their ability to manage the program. So let's move into basics. Shannon, can you tell us just what is a heat pump? What is this technology?
Yeah, so you already have some heat pump-like technologies in your home. For example, your fridge, it uses refrigerant fluid to absorb heat from one place and then move it to the other, so to reduce the heat in your fridge and to cool it down. Heat pumps do not create heat. They just move it. So they take the energy that's in the air, either inside or outside, and they convert it to heat or cooling, depending on what you need. So it can be used to replace both your heating and cooling system all in one. It's the same technology as an air conditioner, but because it's not generating any type of new heat, really, it's more efficient and can achieve efficiencies up to 100%. So unlike air conditioning, it's capable of switching from one system, from heating over to cooling all in one. And they can be up to 3 times more efficient than standard heating and cooling technologies. So they're relatively new, but they are growing in popularity all across the country as we work to transition away from fossil fuel-based heating systems.
Great. Now, some people say, "Oh, I'm not sure. Are they going to be able to give me enough heat in the middle of winter?" What about that, Shannon?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Heat pump technology has come a long way in the past few years. They didn't used to be able to serve cold climates like we have in New England. However, in the past few years, they have grown incredibly in their ability to maintain their capacity in different temperatures. So now they can even operate efficiently down to negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit. We do typically recommend that you explore cold climate heat pumps to make sure that they are suitable for the winters that we experience here. But yeah, many people all across New England and other typically colder climates have replaced their fossil fuels with heat pump systems. And they are a great opportunity. You have a lot of different ways that you can combine them. There's many different forms that we'll talk about in a little bit, but all of them, as long as they are cold climate, they should be able to maintain their capacity even at the coldest temperatures that we experience.
Great. I know we're mostly going to focus today on the ductless version, also known as mini splits. But we'll touch on the others, and most of what we say will apply to both. But tell us about the indoor part of a ductless system.
Yeah, so there are a few different options that you have when it comes to ductless systems. So ductless systems are really good for when you don't have existing ductwork and are looking to provide heating and cooling for different areas of the home. So the first one that you have that most of us are probably used to seeing would be a wall hung unit that you can see there. These are typically placed towards the top of your wall and can be used to condition one single room or a larger open space. There's a lot of different opportunities there. You can also use a floor mount, which is more similar to what you would see with some of the old floor radiators. They're not, I don't think, as common, but you can still put them in depending on, what your wall situation's like, what makes the most sense. And then finally, we also have the ceiling cassettes, which are larger. There is 4-direction ceiling cassettes and singular direction ceiling cassettes, which will direct the flow of air depending on what you need in that room. So these can be really good for heating and cooling large open spaces if you have a very large living room or things like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can mix and match and combine the different variations, but an installer will work with you to figure out what makes the most sense based on your existing home situation.
Great. And these are variously called heads or air handlers. Um, but it's the inside part of a mini split system. So what about the outside part of a mini split system?
Yeah, so they're much like a typical AC unit. You'll also have an outdoor condenser like those that are pictured here. They will need a free flow of air to make sure that they're able to intake air. They take in the air from the outside, and whatever the temperature of the energy or the air is outside, they get the energy from that. And then it goes through the process to either heat or cool depending on what you need. It's really important that the outdoor condensers are installed properly. You want them up off of the ground, and you want to make sure that they're not going to be covered up or get too much snow on them, things like that. You will also need your refrigerant line to be covered. So there are several best practices when it comes to installing the outdoor condensers that your installer or Clean Heat Rhode Island can provide advice on should you need it.
Great. I just wanted to touch briefly on why Green Energy Consumers Alliance is promoting heat pumps, is educating consumers about heat pumps, and why there are state and federal incentives to install them. And that is because of climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with oil, propane, and natural gas. This is with the current electric grid, and this is a few years old now. It's based on Mass CEC data. But you see these are the oil, propane, and natural gas emissions. Electric baseboard is similar to oil because electric baseboard is relatively inefficient. But when you get to the air source heat pump and the ground source heat pump, much lower emissions. They just use the electricity so much more efficiently. And as our grid is steadily getting greener, and when we get to 100% green electricity, we will have zero greenhouse gas emissions from heat pumps and from electric baseboard for that matter, but the emissions will still be there for oil, propane, and natural gas. And that is why the thousands of dollars that are available to most consumers to install heat pumps at this time, because we all have to do it sooner or later, and sooner is better than later. We're not going to touch much on heat pump water heaters, but I just wanted to note that there are, in addition to heating your space with heat pumps, you can also heat your hot water with heat pumps. These are 2 to 3 times more efficient than electric resistance tanks. So if you currently have an electric resistance tank, definitely you should be thinking about your next replacement when the time comes to replace it. Might very well need to be a heat pump water heater. And for gas or oil heated hot water systems, you want to start investigating whether this is possible for your home. They do need adequate space for air exchange, so you can't stick this in a little utility closet. It really needs to have a basement size space. It does need electrical wiring. That's a 240 volt circuit. There are plug-in models that are in development, but they're not yet available in our region where the temperatures get so cold. It will need a condensate drain because it's pulling as it pulls the heat out of the air. It will create some moisture or percolate some moisture, and that needs to be captured and drained off. So it will make the space colder and drier. So if you have a partially finished basement, that's a consideration that you should talk about with the installer. Now let's move on to costs and incentives, the heart of our presentation. Shannon, I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one that I would like to talk about is some of the rebates and incentives that are available through Clean Heat Rhode Island and the utilities. So if we go on to the next slide, I have a overview here. Yes. Oh, so first let's talk about, installation costs. So how much will a heat pump cost for your home? Is a very common question. However, it is hard to determine because it depends so heavily on your home or your property, as well as your goals and the region that you're in. So for example, if you're looking for comfort or energy efficiency, there's different ways that you can design heat pump systems to fit your house. So on average, one small ductless unit costs about $7,000 to $8,000, and you could need a variety of small ductless units to properly fit your home, properly heat and cool it. If you're looking at a whole home system, so if you're wanting to replace all of your heating and cooling for your entire home, this can get more expensive at around $18,000 to $30,000, again, depending on the size of your house, how many rooms you have, how well insulated it is. But overall, the costs are relatively comparable to fossil fuel heating and central air. So while it is a little bit of an initial upfront cost, they are more efficient and should help you over time compared to fossil fuel heating systems. One thing to note is that you may also need to upgrade your electrical service with the installation of a heat pump, depending on what you have. Many homes need to upgrade to a 200 amp service. So you should just consider that when thinking about potential installation costs. But most importantly, there are resources available right here in Rhode Island to help you pay for these systems and help to offset a little bit of those costs. So we can look into that now. Okay, sorry, I forgot the order of these actually. Again, before we get into all of those, one of the best ways to figure out what type of system is right for your home, how much you're going to look at paying for the system, what happens to your operating costs. We have services available to help you figure this out. So one of our best services is a consultation with our heat pump specialist, Justin, who is here today. You can schedule a 45-minute consultation to talk about a lot of different things. You can talk about how heat pumps work if you have a very basic understanding, or maybe you're not familiar at all. You can also learn more about the incentives that you would be available for. We can provide some tailored recommendations based on what information you provide us on your home, and can give you guidance on working with contractors and how to solicit some quotes that make the most sense for your home. And then on the right here, we have an example of our quote review. Oh, sorry, our quote review that that if you have multiple quotes, so say if you collect various quotes, we typically recommend that you collect 3 just to have a good idea of how much systems cost and what the market's looking like. If you have multiple quotes and are having a hard time picking one, or maybe you're not sure what to look for, you can submit your quotes for review on our website, and we will provide a detailed report on what kind of services or what kind of things that we find within those quotes that are notable. So things like operating costs, the number of units that might need to be installed, things like that. And then we also offer consultation services. So now if you go to the next one, we have gotten great reviews so far, even since the beginning of the month in September, on our consultation services. Here's just one recommendation that we received from a customer, but those are great services that can be really helpful if you are looking for a little bit more assistance. And then additionally, if you are a commercial customer, we also offer commercial design reviews for those projects that are a little bit more in depth. And so the great thing about incentives for heat pumps in Rhode Island is that you're able to combine them. So Clean Heat Rhode Island is independent from any utility rebate programs and offers incentives for all residents in Rhode Island, regardless of your utility. You can use those incentives. You can also combine them with utility rebates, which are available depending on the utility that you have. And there's now federal tax credits available to help offset the cost of your heat pump as well. So you can combine all of these to help reduce the costs as much as possible. We do have all of these different incentives outlined on our website at cleanheatri.com/additional-incentives, which provides a quick reference for all of the different utility rebates, as well as federal tax credits and the links to where you can learn more. But then let's get into the overview of all of what's available. So for Rhode Island residential customers, there are several different incentives available. For air source heat pumps, it's going to depend on if it is ducted, a mix of ducted and non-ducted, or non-ducted, or what we typically call a mini split. So through Clean Heat Rhode Island, this offering is $1,000 per ton, and a ton is designated as 12,000 BTUs. So if you're more familiar with that type of measuring in systems, it'll be 12,000 per ton, or sorry, 1,000 per ton, or 12,000 BTUs. Rhode Island Energy also has incentives for air source heat pumps, $350 per ton or $150 per ton for those mini splits. Block Island Power and Pasco also have some smaller incentives available for those. And then we also do offer incentives for ground source heat pumps, also known as geothermal. That's going to be a little bit of higher of an incentive because those systems typically cost a bit more. So we do also have some more information available on ground source heat pumps, though we're not going to focus on those today. And all of those that I just mentioned are for those who do not currently heat with electricity, so fossil fuel-based systems. For those who do already have electric resistance, there is an enhanced incentive through Rhode Island Energy for $12.50 per ton that you can take advantage of there as well. And then we can get into some additional incentives that I didn't highlight here. But Clean Heat Rhode Island offers an income eligible incentive, which covers 100% the cost of the project. And this is for those who qualify as low income. So either have SNAP benefits, LIHEAP, or a utility discount rate, or if you don't currently participate in any of those but believe that you should be qualified as income eligible, you can also use a link within our application to qualify. One thing with that program is that gas customers are not eligible, and that is because gas is typically cheaper to use than electricity. So there is the potential for the operating costs to increase there. With our income eligible program, we do not want to be increasing operation costs, so gas customers are not included in that program right now. Additionally, we also offer incentives for electrical service upgrades. That'll be $500, and that's if you're installing a qualifying air source heat pump, ground source heat pump, or heat pump water heaters. If you need to upgrade your service for that installation, we'll pay $500 towards that. And then we also offer incentives for heat pump water heaters. So there's $750 for Clean Heat Rhode Island, and there's also some through the utilities. There's a higher incentive offered for a split system heat pump water heater. And again, there's the link if you're interested in learning a little bit more about all of these different incentives. And then finally, there is also a federal tax credit. So that offers 30% of the cost of the project up to $2,000 for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. There is a requirement to meet high energy efficiency standards as part of that program. And there are also other credits available for things like the electrical upgrades. You also don't have a cap associated with that program, so you can continue to make home improvements year after year and still take advantage of that credit. And again, this is a separate credit, the federal tax credit. So we would recommend that you consult with a tax professional before, depending on these rebates. We want to make sure you're eligible ahead of time. So that is independent, but you can take advantage of that Clean Heat Rhode Island and the utility sponsored rebates.
And I'll just add, there is going to be a federally funded rebate, but the programs have not yet started. So those are not active at this time.
Yes.
And
Okay.
Shannon, you were going to talk about operating costs. Is that right?
Yeah.
Great.
And so when it comes to operating costs, it's important to think about how your system is going to operate across different seasons. So the efficiency, temperature, and fuel cost will all play into the operating costs. So you'll need to think about how much electricity you'll need to be using at each season. And that's going to depend on the weather data for your region. So for our climate, most of the year is spent above freezing, as you can see here through this temperature data. This is for general New England. It's not specific to Rhode Island, but it's a general overview of kind of what our trends look like. And you can see that as the temperature drops, the efficiency of the system will drop a little bit. And as the temperature reaches higher temperatures, it'll be easier to heat and cool. But just know that you should take into consideration the operating costs when it comes to installing heat pumps. You'll want to look at your historic fuel usage data if you have that available. If you have a currently heating with fossil fuels, you'll want to look at how much you're typically spending on fuel per year, and then try to calculate how much you might be spending on electricity per year to give you a better idea of what those operating costs might look like over time.
All right. So, yeah, I'll jump in on this. So I just wanted to piggyback off that previous slide. Along the bottom, what we have is the outdoor temperature, and then on the right-hand side, the chart goes up, and it's letting you know how many hours we spend at each of those temperatures. Okay, and so there are some scenarios where, depending on your electricity rate, there is a typically between the temperatures of 30 degrees and 60 degrees, a heat pump's performance is going to be its best. It's going to be the most efficient when operating between 32 and 60 degrees. And so for folks who might heat with, let's say, oil, propane, there's a temperature at which your oil heat might actually be of lower cost, but that's not necessarily a good reason to stick with oil. Because as you aggregate that data over the course of the whole heating season, air source heat pumps typically do perform better than oil, propane, and electric resistance. In this example that we have here, they're showing you the cost comparison between all the different fuel types. with a very low electricity rate. Now in Rhode Island, our electricity rate is 24 cents a kilowatt hour. And so this is showing an even lower rate than what most Rhode Islanders have. But Rhode Islanders could potentially have a lower electricity rate if they've adopted solar and have some other options that can help reduce that cost. And so with a low electricity rate, you can see how air source heat pumps can actually outperform even some natural gas systems. If we switch over to the next slide, the cost for natural gas, oil, propane is all the same on this slide, but this would be if all those fuels stayed the same price, but the only thing that went up was electricity, electricity going up to 49 cents a kilowatt hour. The air source heat pump will outperform the oil and the propane, down to like 36 degrees. But typically, if the cost of electricity goes up, usually the cost of fossil fuels are also going up along with it. Like they tend to follow the same paths. So with our current rates, if you are heating with natural gas, you're likely to have an increased cost. But if you're heating with oil, propane, electric resistance, you're more likely to see your operating costs drop. However, that is also based on making sure that you have a cold climate heat pump that's going to maintain its heating capacities at lower temperatures, and the systems are sized appropriately for their home, not being oversized and short cycling the majority of the year.
Great. Thanks, Justin. The takeaway on this really is that your electricity cost will be very important in figuring out the operating cost of an electric heat system, obviously, and then what you're replacing, if it's gas or oil or propane, what price those things are going to be. And of course, with all of those, you're projecting 15 years into the future to get the entire life cycle cost. So I highly recommend talking with Clean Heat Rhode Island and getting that quote comparison and that virtual consultation, because they can really walk you through that complex question. Let's move on to design options. Shannon, what about for homes that already have ductwork? They have a furnace, not a boiler.
Yeah. So for those who have ductwork and have a furnace, it allows for a pretty easy replacement of that fossil fuel system to a heat pump with a whole home fully ducted system. So you can fairly easily connect a new heat pump system to the existing ductwork to distribute the heating and cooling all throughout your home.
And if the home has central air conditioning.
Yeah, and so it does depend on the current layout of your house and the system that exists, but heat pumps are a great replacement for central AC. It could be, one or two or a few different mini splits, or you could do a whole home system. But it does require that the ductwork that's existing is in good condition and can be used. The systems can become much more expensive if you are replacing ductwork or installing new ductwork.
Great. And what about for those homes that lack ductwork? So they don't have central AC and they don't have a furnace. They do have a boiler with radiators or with baseboard hydronic heat.
Yeah, and so there's a few different options. You can always, if it's an option, you could install new ductwork. Again, that's going to be costly, but it will probably get you the best distribution of that heating and cooling throughout your home. If that's not an option, you can look at ductless or mini split systems. So that's what we've talked about kind of up until this point. And there's several different combinations of layouts that you can have, but a single head can serve one large open room. You can also have a single zone or multi-zone. And you can also set things like integrated controls and specific, thermostats to help adjust those depending, across your home. But you'll typically have a combination of mini splits or Yeah, either the wall, floor, ceiling mounts, it kind of depends. But in all of these, you would still need that outdoor condenser, and you'd need that to be installed properly, as we talked about earlier.
Right. There are hydronic heat pumps in development, but at present there's nothing that's really commercially available
Yes.
in our area, except the hydronic for if you have radiant flooring, you could potentially use a hydronic then there. Um, Justin, you want to walk us through this example of a home that has a heat load of 24,000 BTUs per hour, um, and how we might uh, transition to heat pumps in this home?
Yeah. So just do you have additional slides after this that show some of the other stuff?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. So we'll go back to this other one. So this is a major point that I focus on in our consultations, the 45-minute consultation. It's just understanding that there are trade-offs when it comes to heat pumps, how you can design these for your home and what the effects are. So I grew up in Central Falls. I lived on the second floor of a two-family. The home was uninsulated. We had a single space heater in the middle room, and that was the warmest room. The further away we got from the space heater, the colder it got. Some folks who might heat with wood or pellet stoves, you may understand this concept as well. The space where that system is going to be the warmest, but the further away you get, it tends to get a little cooler. And so trade-offs being upfront cost of a system, as well as the efficiency. And the comfort in different parts of the home. You can come up with different configurations. So in this example, if this single floor ranch only had a heat load of 24,000 BTUs, technically you could put a 24,000 BTU head in the most open area. But understand that the further away you get from where that system is, air does not like to take right turns. And so the bedrooms are typically going to be several degrees colder, and you're going to want to lean in on what I would call your thermal envelope. So how well insulated the home is. So if your home's not well insulated, the bedrooms are going to lose a lot of heat faster than maybe that heat pump may be able to provide adequate heating across the entire building too. Okay. One of the things that you can do is, let's say this home was zoned with the main open area as one zone, and then maybe the bedrooms are a separate zone. You could just replace a zone on your home. Like let's say you had a forced hot water boiler, and just shut the one zone down in the main living area, keep the ones active in the bedrooms, and just put a heat pump in that open area to satisfy that. Only installing one heat pump for the entire home, like an indoor unit, will be less expensive, but it might not be the most efficient, and you're going to have temperature differentials throughout the home. If you want to jump to the next slide.
Yeah, I'll just jump in for a moment
Yeah.
though on this. This is almost a good example of what I have in my home, where I have one, I think it's a 1.5 ton heat pump in our kitchen, living room, dining room area. And then we have our house was built with, well, it has electric baseboard. So the bedrooms have electric baseboard. We only turn those on, at night on a cold night when we're needing some extra heat there. But in general, that 1.5 ton heat pump keeps the living area fine during the day, and we have the electric baseboard as the backup, and it's not very expensive. We're in the middle floor of a triple decker, and so we're getting heat from below, and we're keeping heat because the upstairs is heated as well. So it is an option, but let's move on to a more robust system.
Now, the other thing to keep in mind with these systems is that oftentimes the recommendation is to put a head in every room. And sometimes that's the right fit, but oftentimes it's not. And the issue with this is, if this space needed 24,000 BTUs of heat, The more indoor units you attach to one outdoor unit, the larger that outdoor unit becomes. And so in order to fit 4 heads on a system, you might need a 36K system, which now is way oversized for that home's heating load. And if you're oversized for heating, you're way oversized for cooling. Before I get into what being oversized for cooling does, I just want to talk about the size of the average bedroom and the smallest size indoor unit you can get. And so typically an average size bedroom is smaller and has a lower heat load than the smallest indoor head. And also that outdoor unit has a minimum capacity, meaning when it turns on, it has the ability to ramp up and give you a range of BTU capacity. But a typical 36K system might have a minimum operating output of, let's say, 12,000 BTUs. And so if you put a 6,000 or a 9,000 BTU head inside your bedroom, and your bedroom only needs 2,000 BTUs of heat, that system's not going to perform well because it's going to kick on and kick off and kick on and kick off. And it's kicking on and kicking off at the outdoor unit where most of the power is actually being used for the system. And so you're often going to pay more for more indoor heads. You're going to pay more for a bigger unit. And you're going to pay more over the course of your heating and cooling seasons because the system is not operating in a modulation mode. Modulation is like driving your car on cruise control. And even if you had the most efficient vehicle, if you drove it pedal to the metal, brakes, you're not going to get good gas mileage. And so oftentimes these multi-zone systems, they call for heating and cooling at different times from one another, which triggers the outdoor unit to kick on and kick off a lot. If you are oversized for cooling as well, and that in the system short cycling during the summer months, it's not running long enough to extract the humidity out of the air, which is what helps us feel comfortable. If you drop the temperature in a space too fast without extracting the humidity, the air, cold air can't hold as much moisture as warm air. And so it has the opposite effect with humidity. The temperature drops so fast that your humidity actually goes up. And if your humidity goes up, you have the potential for mold problems. Also, it feels cold and damp, which is never a good feeling. And I've seen scenarios so severe. This is a common thing with folks who oversize window air conditioners in their bedrooms, is that the humidity goes up so high that the blankets and sheets, the dryness of that wants to absorb the moisture, and you end up with damp sheets. And so we typically caution folks against trying to put an indoor unit in every single room to avoid oversizing the systems.
Great, and there is a solution for the small bedrooms. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely, and you can get a little, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's really trade-offs to everything, and so the optimal solution would be to have an indoor unit serving the large open areas. And then if you do have an attic above you or a basement below you, you can install a mini ducted unit, and that will split the load of an indoor unit between 2 rooms. And so instead of having a head in both bedrooms, because maybe you want the privacy when you go to bed at night, you can still maintain that privacy without the poor system performance. And so a split ducted unit will connect to ductwork that feeds just 2 smaller rooms. And a lot of folks ask a question like, well, what about the bathroom? Well, the bathroom only has a very short wall that leads to the outside. And if it's insulated, the heat surrounding the bathroom is going to enter the bathroom faster than the heat escaping the bathroom through that short insulated wall. And so the bathroom will still be comfortable. And for some folks, they often will install like an electric baseboard heater in that bathroom if you specifically wanted it to be warm in there. If, let's say, the way your home is designed prevents you from adding a split ducted system, one of the other things you can do is just add an additional head in maybe the larger of the bedrooms, with the understanding that during the days, we're going to keep the doors all open. That way that heat is distributed more evenly. And again, so long as your home is well insulated, you could shut the doors at night and no one's going to be freezing. You're not in any risk of, it's not like the bedroom next door is suddenly going to be 10 degrees colder. That's just not going to happen. I have real world examples where folks might have, let's say 4 bedrooms on the top floor, and they'll use a head on each corner, on opposite corners, keeping all the doors open. Everybody's comfortable. Even when you close the doors at night, none of the kids are freezing.
Great. Thanks, Justin. We just want to close now and move on to some of your questions. In closing, we do webinars frequently. You can find those on our events page at greenenergyconsumers.org events, and you can find recorded webinars, previous recorded webinars on YouTube, and we will send out a recording of this, or a link to a recording of this, to everybody who's registered today. And there's a webinar tomorrow for Clean Heat Rhode Island. Shannon, tell us about this webinar.
Yeah, sorry about that line there. We have a similar webinar tomorrow evening for Clean Heat Rhode Islanders. Anyone who's interested in learning about Clean Heat Rhode Island will go into a little bit more detail about the program, the offerings that are available, the different incentives. We'll get into more detail about the eligibility criteria and what qualifies and what doesn't. So you can register for that at cleanheatri.com/webinar. We'll also have a recording and the slides available on our website afterwards. And then I also did want to point out, if you have follow-up questions, or if you want to learn a little bit more about heat pumps, we do have a library of resources on our website at cleanheatri.com/resources, and then program guides. We have a heat pump buying guide and other helpful resources if you're thinking about installing heat pumps. And then you can also get into contact with us. You can email us at cleanheatri@abodem.com, or you can call us Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. You would typically, if you're a residential customer, you would hit 2 when it tells you, and that would give you over to us, and we'll be able to address any more heat pump related questions or program eligibility questions.
Great, thanks. I'm looking forward to that webinar. Green Energy Consumers is a nonprofit. We welcome donations, and I am happy to take questions afterwards as well. And I'll turn off the slides now, but if we have a question specific to them, we can bring them back if need be. Stop. Maybe I won't stop sharing. I don't see how to do that. But we can definitely take the questions.
We did have one question that Justin has answered regarding a list of suggested vendors. So Clean Heat Rhode Island does have a heat pump installer network, which is required to access the incentives. So if you're looking for those incentives or the utility incentives, there might be installer requirements. The Clean Heat Rhode Island heat pump installer network does include all of the Rhode Island energy installers, so you should still be able to qualify for both, but the link is available on our website if you're looking to find an installer to work with. We have over 70 available.
Shannon, here's a question that I'm extrapolating from a comment about somebody who has installed some heat pumps for part of their heating needs, and they'd like to move, get rid of their oil burning equipment in the future. Given that they've already partially converted to heat pumps, do you know what incentives they would qualify for?
Yeah, it does depend on what the primary heating source is. So for most Clean Heat Rhode Island incentives, you do need to sign an attestation saying that you do currently primarily heat with fossil fuel-based systems. So Clean Heat Rhode Island does not currently incentivize the transition from existing heat pumps, but we do go by what your primary heating source is. So there's not a ton of options available right now for those who currently heat with heat pumps or are looking for new heat pumps. But if you do currently have fossil fuel as your primary heating source, then you can take advantage of both Rhode Island Energy or the utility incentives and Clean Heat Rhode Island incentives.
Great. And somebody asks, they've already upgraded to 200 amp. Can they apply for a rebate to offset that cost? Is it retroactive?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is not. It is only the electrical service upgrades are only offered for those who are also installing a heat pump or a heat pump water heater at the same time. So if that was installed, those were both done after September 1st of this year, then they may be eligible, but anything done prior to that is not. So it has to be kind of along with a qualifying system. Great. And then for those who are looking for scheduling a consultation with Clean Heat Rhode Island, you can do that at cleanheatri.com. If you just go to I am a homeowner and scroll down, there'll be a link to schedule a consultation with Justin. I will say we have had some very high demand for our consultation services, so we are booked out a bit. I think there's still some availability in October and November, but if you are really looking for a consultation, feel free to get in contact with us. We'll try to answer your questions over the phone or over email in the meantime. Do know that the consultations are not required to access the incentives. They're only required for the income eligible 100% covered program.
I would also advise folks to join our webinar tomorrow, as we will be hitting some of the subjects that are often talked about in the 45-minute consultation. So that might answer a lot of your questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Oops, sorry.
The consultations, there was a question about whether or not it's in person. The consultations that we offer are 100% virtual. So we'll send you, you'll sign up and you'll get an email with a link to join online. There will be a Google Meets video link for residential customers. So it'll just show up in your email and you'll get a link to sign up to that. But they are all virtual. So you can do it on your time completely remotely, and you can have follow-up conversations as needed as well. Okay, let's see.
I see that a number of people noted that they are heating with oil at present. Can you just remind people what the oil heat displacing oil incentive is?
Yeah. So for displacing oil, you'd be eligible for our residential or income eligible incentives, depending. If you're the residential, that would be the $1,000 per ton for an air source heat pump. So oil is eligible for all of the Clean Heat Rhode Island incentives.
And am I right that people could think of a ton of heating as enough capacity to heat roughly 300 to 500 square feet of a well-insulated building?
That's a good question. I believe so. Justin, do you have more insight?
There are a lot of factors that will affect the answer to your question there. How tall are the ceilings? How many exterior walls are there? For example, is this a 3-season room with a bunch of windows facing south versus facing north? That's going to have a huge impact on the heating load. Generally, if you take your square footage and you multiply it by 25, that's usually how a lot of installers will ballpark the size of the system for you. I hope that helps.
Yeah, there are some internet calculators to help people estimate their heat load, but you want to take those with they can be useful to get an estimate, but you do want a professional to do that heat load calculation, or at least explain what they're basing a heat load estimate on, whether they're taking into consideration the number of windows and the exposure, etc.
Yes, absolutely. And you can also ask your installers to do a manual J calculation, which takes into consideration all of the different factors specific to your home, including your region, and helps to inform more of their quotes and their design recommendations. So that's something that most of them should be doing anyways, but you can always ask and just make sure that they do run those calculations for you.
I see that someone asks, any idea when the additional federal incentive may be available? And he's referring to the rebate programs. What we did hear earlier this year from the EPA is that November would be the earliest that any states would be able to stand up a program based on the federal IRA, Inflation Reduction Act monies. Um, we would hope that Rhode Island is one of those early states, but states have until August of next year. So there's a long ramp up that's been required, and this is because of needing to get all the stakeholders engaged in how that money should be distributed, et cetera, and to make sure that the um, provisions for equity and environmental justice are being observed, because that's a high priority within the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'll look for that um, uh, in November. Shannon, do you have more on this question?
I don't, not anything additional to that. I was going to link the IRS website for the home energy tax credits, which I know are different than the rebates, but there is more information available on those on the website. I do know that we will be keeping our website up to date as well, that additional incentives page. So if people are looking, we'll keep it up to date on our website once we learn more.
Yeah, the Office of Energy Resources, OER, in Rhode Island is the agency that would be um, uh, posting updates as well, but we haven't yet found a page where where you can sign up for updates as they're released. So we certainly will be sharing that with our contacts as soon as we know anything.
Yep.
And somebody asks more about the efficiency standards for the federal tax credits. Um, do you have anything on that, Shannon?
Yes, I was just sharing the link to that. So the tax credits efficiency will be slightly different from the other incentive programs available in the state. Specifically, they require the efficiency tiers established by the CEE, which I just linked in the chat, which might be helpful. But yeah, the efficiency requirements do vary a little bit. And so if you were to submit, for example, a quote review, we would do a little work looking into what kind of system you're looking at getting installed and try to see what it qualifies for and provide some more information if it may qualify for the federal tax credits. So I would definitely look at the IRS website for more information for their exact eligibility requirements. But for the most part, the newer energy efficient cold climate systems should qualify.
Great. Justin and Shannon, are there any wrap-up comments that you want to make?
I would just say that I think that heat pumps are a very great technology, but I do know that they can be confusing and that there's a lot that you should understand when thinking about putting these into your home. And so Clean Heat Rhode Island has so many resources available to help make this a smooth and seamless process for you. So please feel free to take advantage of the resources that are out there. We're more than willing to work with you to help make sure you can find a system that works well for you.
One thing I would like to add would be just understanding that there's a difference a big difference between a standard capacity heat pump and a cold climate heat pump. Heat pumps are going to be rated and advertised based on the BTUs that they provide for cooling. So for example, a 24,000 BTU heat pump is a 24,000 BTU heat pump because it provides that for cooling and provides that for heating at 47 degrees outside. A standard heat pump might not produce that same 24,000 BTUs of heat as the temperature drops to 17 or 5 degrees. And so if you were to install a standard heat pump, you're going to be cold when the temperature drops. A cold climate heat pump can provide that same 24,000 BTUs of heat at 47 and at 5. And so just making sure that you are sure and your contractor sure that it's a cold climate heat pump is very important. And works down to 5 degrees is different than works well or maintains its capacity at 5 degrees. So just some little things with the semantics can be misleading.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about this program with Clean Heat Rhode Island offering the both the virtual consultations and the quote comparison reports. When you have those that advice from Clean Heat Rhode Island, they will flag for you. Oh no, somebody has quoted you equipment that is not going to be cold climate efficient. Or even that's not going to qualify for the rebates because it's not efficient enough. So this is a really great consumer protection program, and we can't thank you enough for leading the charge on it, Shannon and Justin. Any last words?
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, sure thing, sure thing. All right, well, thanks everybody for coming, and look for a follow-up email from us, and don't hesitate to follow up with us. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.